Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to this episode of SMB Live Rewind. In this episode, we're going to focus on business continuity of Windows Server, Azure Storage, Backup, and Azure Site Recovery, or ASR. My name is Matt Hester. I'm a Senior Partner Technology Strategist out of the South Central area. And let's go ahead and get started and cover off on the agenda. We're going to talk about business continuity overview and disaster recovery as a service. We're also going to talk briefly about Azure Backup and Azure Site Recovery. And in part two of this episode, I will actually take you through the steps of working with Azure Backup. So, when we think about this, how can you offer this to your customers? When you think about building disaster recovery, now hopefully today, as a part of your managed services, you're already backing up your customers' environments on a regular basis. You're trying to protect them in case something goes wrong. But is it a true disaster recovery environment for you to work with? Well, it depends. When you think about this, a lot of SMBs may look at this and say, you know what, we can't do pure disaster recovery. It's too hard. It's too complicated. We don't have enough data retention. We can't store that data. It's too time sensitive. It costs too much money. Well, that's the great thing about our technologies, folks. Nowadays, especially when you start incorporating cloud technologies like Microsoft Azure, we really have a great ability to offer your customers the ability to improve that disaster recovery environment. And when you think about this, what's the average cost? I know a lot of customers say, hey, it costs too much money. Well, how much does it cost if you lose your data? What happens if you lose that data? How long are you going to be out of business? What's going to happen? What's the cost of downtime? So whenever customers really look at the costs of this, how do we evaluate that against what happens if something bad does go on? Well, the great thing about our solutions, though, they are fairly cost effective to begin with, and we can help avoid those disaster scenarios where it could cost your customers tremendous amount of money. And really, all disaster recovery as a service is an ability to look at our businesses, keep them up and running, keep them continuous from an automation perspective, from integration with our systems and ability to availability to actually protect that data. So if something goes wrong, can we have some automation that takes place to bring that information back up to recover that site? How do we do everything at a breadth and depth perspective? I want to protect everything as much as I can. How can we eliminate tape management? A big part of disaster recovery scenarios today cost are those tapes. We can eliminate those tapes inside of it. Now, when I say eliminate, it doesn't mean you still can't do things with tape if there's some kind of internal regulation. We can always do this. And whenever you look at cloud technologies, it's always an and proposition. What can I do and add in cloud? What can I do on-prem and add in that cloud technology? So we have that ability to really offer robust solutions from on-prem all the way to our cloud worlds. And how do we test it? How do we do this in a cost-effective way for us to see? When you look at all the technologies that we can offer from a disaster recovery, you have to look at many different workloads for your customers, from just a pure physical environment to a pure physical environment on-prem that has virtual servers, to a hybrid environment where they have, kind of feet in both worlds, one on private cloud and one in a public cloud, or a pure public cloud infrastructure. How do we offer disaster recovery as a service when you look at the wide variety of different workloads that your customers can run today inside of there, and really starts with just some things that we used to. So when you look at some of these solutions for business continuity, you have to look at this holistically, and it starts with, well, how do you protect an on-prem environment today? How do you give high availability to an environment today? And really, it's clustering. Now, if you're doing workloads like Hyper-V, we have a lot of great Hyper-V failover and replication technologies to really help protect that workload. SQL has always-on technologies to make sure if something goes wrong, we can recover that database. And even the new stuff inside of SQL Server 2016 really changed the game from keeping those databases up and running for those enterprise applications or those customers applications we have inside of it. But how do you take this further? How do you add in some additional protections? Because if a cluster is there, but if you lose that entire site, what happens to the cluster? Well, we have some other technologies to look at. First off, we have just backup. And one of the great things about backup is we actually have an Azure backup server that allows us to back up directly to Azure. And this supports Windows Server backups. It supports Data Protection Manager, and we have a tight integration with Data Protection Manager for this to work inside of the environments. We also have Azure Backup Agents that will run on your modern clients and your modern servers, and you can back those servers directly up to the cloud technologies. Now, why is this important, my friends? Very simple. You've just given your customers an offsite disaster recovery environment. It's called Microsoft Azure, and it really helps protect those customers in case something goes wrong. And now here's the trick. The great thing about using Azure to back up your storage and data here, you can also use the Azure, specifically Azure Virtual Machines, to help recover the data. So that you may not be able to bring back that physical site for your customer or that on-prem site very quickly, but inside of Azure, you can spin up a virtual machine in minutes and recover data to that virtual machine from those Azure backups very, very easily and get your customer back up and running as quick as you can inside of their environments, especially vital to their business. Now, we have another way we can take a look at this is how do we actually safeguard your applications? Well, one of the great workloads that we can protect, especially if you look at customers, whether they're running Hyper-V or VMware, they probably have some kind of virtual machine workloads running inside there. And hopefully they're doing some kind of replication to protect those virtual machines. Well, we have actually introduced a fantastic technology called Azure Site Recovery, or ASR. And what this allows us to do is actually protect those on-prem virtualization environments and actually allow us to recover either to on-prem or to virtual machines inside of Azure. And in case something happens to that on-prem environment, what will happen is Azure Site Recovery will come in and actually say, hey, something failed. Let me actually recover that data for you. Some amazing types of technologies for us to look at. So when you look at all these solutions combined, this is how you offer business continuity to your customers. You start with protecting those on-prem, using Azure Backup for that long-term data retention, and then even taking a look at how do we protect those individual applications inside of there. So when we look at our technologies, first off, we have Azure Backup, and this provides, as I mentioned, offsite data protection. It's encrypted data. If you are encrypting your data on-prem, we can do that, and we can send it directly to our backup vaults inside of Azure to protect your data. It's very easy. It integrates in right with our Windows environments today, and if you download the agent from the Azure environment, folks, it looks just like Windows Backup. The only difference is, and it's a key difference, is that we're backing up those servers to the actual Azure environment for us to work with. It's very easy to do. We have point in time recovery, have up to 99 years of retention, so we have a lot of great ability to control how much data is there, how often are we going to retain that data, and we have a lot of flexibility to control with this. And in part two of this SMB Live Rewind for business continuity, I'll show you how Azure Backup works. Now, the other scenario that we have for business continuity is Azure Site Recovery. And when you think about how are the premises this works, well, today, how do we protect Hyper-V environments? We replicate, or even VMware, and we'll talk about that in just a second. We replicate to another site. We can actually replicate those VMs very nicely inside of it. We might be able to do storage replication with our SANs on the back end and replicate that information as well. It all depends on how you've configured your customer's on-prem Hyper-V environment. Or we can actually now replicate to Azure via Azure Site Recovery and replicate those VMs as our secondary site up inside of Azure. But here's where it gets really fun with our solution, folks. We can do this for VMware as well, or even physical machines. So if we have a VMware host, we can replicate with VMware. We can do all that on-prem. And you know what? We can take that to Azure as well. So we have the ability with ASR to really take that virtualized environment and that virtualized workload and use Azure to help protect it, to help orchestrate that failover in case something does go wrong on that environment. And from a cost perspective, pretty much Hyper-V and VMware from a standpoint of using ASR costs the same. So it's really what environment are you coming from and how is ASR actually going to protect that inside of there. So when you look at the different types of scenarios that we have, it's all about that orchestrated disaster recovery. Now this picture happens to show System Center. System Center is not a requirement for Azure Site Recovery, but you do have to have a process server on-prem to be able to bring this up. And the nice thing about this is Azure becomes kind of a witness of that environment, but also the failover component. Not only can we fail it back over in case something happens in site A to site B, we could actually just say, you know what, instead of failing it over to site B, because maybe I don't have another site, as a smaller customer, I can fail them over inside of Azure and help recover that environment very nicely for you. Now, the great thing about Azure Site Recovery, and a nice little hidden benefit for it, is that we talk about it in the context of this session around disaster recovery and business continuity. But the great thing about Azure Site Recovery, it can be used as a migration concept as well, where I can take those physical or virtualized workloads running VMware or Hyper-V and actually use ASR to replicate them up into Azure, get those things migrated and use Azure now as my primary storage. So for those customers that say, you know what, I want to move my virtual machines into the Azure platform, ASR can actually be used as a migration tool in that aspect as well. So as you can see, we have lots of great opportunities. There's lots of ways to help protect your customers' data, regardless of where they currently are at or where they're going to currently move to. Um, Cloud partners that can do more of these types of things and extend their services above and beyond Office 365 or other cloud offerings, you're going to be more profitable. ASR provides a great way to protect those virtualized workloads. Now, we also have an Azure in 5 minutes video series up on our blog. I would definitely check that out. It's going to offer some great things for you. So, once again, thank you for watching. My name is Matt Hester. I hope you enjoyed this episode at SMB Live Rewind.